Welcome to the Budget Advisory Committee meeting, Thursday, September 18th, 5:15. Call to order, Peter Eckel, Budget Advisory Committee.
Laura Schultz-Cooper, Budget Advisory Committee.
Tim Dodd, Deputy City Manager.
Jay Knight, Budget Advisory Committee.
Rita Russell, City Council Liaison.
Sean Lewis, City Manager.
Kevin Ingles, Director of Finance.
Tyson Thornburg, Budget and Financial Analyst.
Those online?
Nevin Mondel, Budget Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Nevin. Okay, approval of minutes from our September 4th, 2025 meeting. Although, any motion to approve those?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Okay, I heard two. All those in favor? Aye. Oh, yes, Nevin and Jay. Let's take Jay. He spoke first. Second was Nevin. Thank you. I'll make sure to clarify in the future. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 4 ayes. Laura, Jay, Nevin, Peter. Recognition of public comment. Take that as there is none today. And we could call it new business, but new business. And we are talking about the city's reserve policy, which will limit it at that, I think, for this purpose. But we also should consider that the reserve policy and the investment policy are coupled. And I don't know that we necessarily spoke about that last time. I was just going to throw that out there, and we'll add it to our list, and I'll take notes online tonight. Any comments? And also, I'll just add, I'd like us to not be here until 6:30. So outside any comments on that, the investment and reserve policy tie, I'd like us to just try to come to a set of 4 or 5 measures that we want to use to write the issuance. Is that right? What do we call the form for the city?
Yeah, an issue brief.
Issue brief.
Issue brief. So I hope that we can come to some measurable decisions today of what we're going to put in there. I'm not asking that we write it tonight, but we do need to do something online between now and the next meeting, because we will finish this discussion then, and I don't want it to take more than about 20 minutes if we can. And there'll be some homework, but I know it's been a busy month. So any comments on the tie with the policy and any thoughts on that before we get into agree on use condition? I'll take that as none and just noted. So let's get into use conditions, the top of those being declared emergencies or disasters, including loss of a major revenue source. I did put my notes in here, by the way. I didn't notice anything else as of this afternoon, but can anyone confirm that there was nothing beyond what we had taken last time and then my note?
Yeah, I did not add anything.
I added some very last minute notes, but more for my internal use.
Well, maybe we should start with those.
Mine were related to the decisions that we needed to make. As I looked over it, my recommendation or thought process was that as we have these different triggers, trackers, conditionals, we could split them into an authorization layer. So what would be recommended or required for a drawdown below the target, And then the trigger dashboard that is more on that strategic side of things, which would be connected to budgetary planning and helping city council maybe or the finance team set a reserve target for the year, which is where we would include those volatility measures, economic indicators. Yeah. So that is essentially what my notes are, and then some timing pieces as well of when those different layers could be utilized.
That's great. I think the drawdown, we'll have to understand that a little more maybe, but I think that's part of our use conditions consideration. And I think set the reserve target for, call it the year. You maybe have to put a switch on that one, but I know that budgets are amended, and that's the case in my line of work as well. And so I think seeing a year forward is probably pretty reasonable given the setting of the budget and what we think is going to happen. And I like the timing too. So also maybe more to explain there. But do we want what would you all like to move into next? You want to go down the order of these, or would you like to suggest your top 2 or 3 and let's focus on those and round out this list? Or any feedback is welcome. I'll take that as a no. Laura, what do you think we should settle first? Out of this list of now 6, I'll call it the one you just added.
I think the bulk of the decision making might be around which triggers, which indicators we want to utilize. So that is where we're going to need to spend the bulk of our time today.
I'm going to pull up budget. I didn't have time to get into the 25, but we have through 24. I know things change. The thing on the trigger, to me, this reserve policy, when we adjust, would obviously make sense when there's a conditional change, which we'll get into. But it would seem to me that from the outset of posting the budget that we would have a pretty good idea of the 12 months forward. What triggers should we consider? I'm going to throw out that one we can start with maybe, and any ideas are helpful. But is to, let me look at my notes here, make sure I don't forget anything. Well, I think we can start with the expenditures versus revenue. I think that makes sense. It's sort of continuing what we already have in place to the degree that we have a similar assessment from the get-go. And any others for the top 2 or 3? I think unassigned fund balance could be maybe the second one. Because we did note that that has been a pressure and would be maybe a current one on the reserve policy. So some adjustment factor I think we can assign to that.
I'd be interested to see a measure of revenue volatility. It suggested maybe current year projection sitting versus maybe the 10-year history in terms of percentile range. We can talk about those exact thresholds. Another one I would maybe vote for is looking at any changes for the share of the tax mix, so the sales and use tax percentage of general fund.
What was that second one again, Laura?
Any changes, so what percentage of that sales and use tax makes of our revenue mix?
Yeah, and the one before that, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. the current year projection of maybe revenue growth compared to the last, I think I had said 10 years. You look at 10 years of revenue growth, what's our current year projection and the percentile compared to the 10 years?
Okay, so I love that, and it gives you something to make. It makes a tenth of an adjustment every year based on a historical basis, right? It's simple, it makes sense. So I'm definitely going to vote for that one too. And I think you're right. What's our reliance on sales and use tax revenue in the upcoming budget? So there's 4 factors. Are there any others? Nevin, any thoughts?
So I did have some thoughts. I definitely, again, I think that looking at revenue relative to expenses as a ratio makes sense to me. I agree looking at sales tax as a proportion of revenue over a period of time. I don't know if it needs to be 10 years, but I was looking at other municipalities outside of the state of Colorado that have ratcheting structures and like what sort of criteria they use to adjust it. I haven't outside of like a few academic articles considering formulas. I haven't found like many examples of municipalities that are directly using a formula to like adjust their reserves. But I think like a lot. I think there's benefit to trying to adapt some of the similar criteria that other municipalities are using, and so a lot of them will of course use revenue or revenue over expenditures or something like that. A lot of them will use like economic trends over like 3 or 2 or 4 year period. And a lot of municipalities will just simply base it off of will simply base it off of the percentage of unspent funds or percentage of unmet needs relative to percentage of unmet needs relative to previous revenues.
I would call, is it reasonable to project that could be the unassigned fund balance? Based on your last
That
sentence.
what could be the unassigned
Say your last
fund
sentence
balance?
one more time, just for the group. Thank you.
So essentially like one of the criteria that I have seen is like potentially like forecasts for future needs, like a year out over like so it would be like next year's need over this year's revenue essentially.
So no, not
there's a
but I like that idea. Go ahead.
There's a city in Texas that I saw does something like that. I think it was like Canyon something, Texas. Hold on. I'm flipping through my notes. I apologize. I've been feeling a little off today, so I'm moving a little slow. Why don't we discuss, and I will see if I can find my notes about that municipality.
Yeah, I would love that if you could share just that example. So I'm kind of envisioning the policy is going to read where I have 5 things on the list right now, where we have, call it 5 factors, or maybe it's 7 factors. Maybe it's just 3. But that the balance of that one equation, economic equation or a sales and use tax equation or whatever it is. Well, actually, let's just say an economic equation. And that would be like a greater economic equation, like maybe a national metric, GDP or CPI, or I don't love CPI, but one of those, okay? The second factor would be, a sales and use tax revenue adjustment where it is historically trended for 10 years, let's call it, where it's budgeted to be next year, what that differential and that change is over the average. And so that would be number 2, perhaps. And then an expenditure revenue calculation, which all these things to me are pretty objective, not to say that subjective measurement will not be needed from city council and the city. But that comes with experience and the management of the city and what city council thinks. But and then a fourth one would be the unassigned fund balance. I'm not sure how we would factor in like a metric for that, but when that balance is reduced, we then roll into the reserve policy, and I don't see that functionally changing. So maybe some way to come up with that, or maybe it's just how much is in there. Because once we're out of the unassigned fund balance, we're into reserve policy. And then a current year projection of revenue growth might be a fifth. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'd be curious. Sorry. I'd be curious
No,
for
go
the
ahead.
metric with unassigned fund balance if we have a percentage target, like a contingency built into our budgeting process, and if we could use that as a threshold. Go ahead, Nevin, sorry.
No, I had a similar thought. Like to be honest, I don't think unassigned fund balance is going to be particularly relevant because while it'll certainly be relevant to the amount that a fund might be drawn down, I think that I think it's more valuable in determining what to contribute to a reserve, but I think that the when you're drawing from the reserve, what we're trying to set up is like guidelines for like relative limits, right? And so like the threshold that we set would be a threshold. And so if you have unreserved fund balance, then you'd be less likely to meet that threshold, right? But the threshold could still be in place. Now, as far as rebuilding that reserve, if there's an unassigned fund balance, then that could potentially be helpful in determining one, that it's time to rebuild the reserve, but two, like I guess the relative amount of that to put back into the reserve, right? Because you don't want to like delay recovery by pulling out funds. So I think it's more helpful in my mind. And let me know if other people are approaching this differently. But unassigned fund balance to me only really makes sense when setting like thresholds for rebuilding the funds as opposed to withdrawing the funds.
I think I understand what you're saying. In terms of including the unassigned fund balance in here, it would be to take that unassigned fund balance that's in the budget, let's call it, or amended budget, over like the total revenue, or over the capital budget, so that we say, okay, we have 10 million unassigned, we have a capital budget of 25 million, and so what's that ratio year over year? I would think that we could get that information from finance to show us what the capital budget has totaled over the years and the unassigned fund balance based on a year-ending date or what have you. That's what I was trying to get to, if that makes sense. So I have 5 things on the list. I don't know if anybody else has any others, and I can read through them one more time, if that's helpful.
I'd appreciate that if you could read through that list.
One other thing that may be worth considering, because I pulled up that City of Canyon, Texas, they also consider, again, it's not like a true formula, but they also consider debt service, which I think could be another valuable consideration.
I agree. That's a good one. I added it to the list, but now we're at 6.
Sorry to pile on.
Fine. So here's the list. So essentially, to make a objective opinion, and maybe the 7th thing on this list is the subjective opinion of City Council. So maybe we just solved our problem, but let's see what you all think. And I want you to be critical because we're all in this together. So the greater percentage change would be how you would determine to make a reserve adjustment. And of those triggers, as I understand them, and please stop me if I'm missing this, we would take one greater economic metric and say, is it favorable to a percentage basis or unfavorable? So if GDP is growing by 3.5%, that's favorable. If it's growing by 1.5, then that's considered negative. So we might need to draw a line there. So that's number one greater economic metric. 2, sales and use tax revenue. So I think this would be what the budgeted amount is on a percentage basis compared to what? A 10-year historical trend? Okay. That's number 2, sales and use tax revenue. Number 3, expenditures over revenue. And maybe that's number 1. I didn't put these in order of importance. But expenditures over revenue, which we've done historically, I think it works great, makes sense. Go back 10 year, compare it to the average compared to going forward. Now I say that, I think there has been additional financial stress in the last few years than in the years before that. And that's a subjective statement, but I have looked at the numbers and I'll pull them up. So expenditures over revenue would be 1. Unassigned fund balance over total revenue or the capital budget might make more sense. I don't know if anyone has an opinion on that or if they disagree completely. Take that as a no. So one of the 4 is unassigned fund balance over the capital budget. And that's a 1 measurement per year or per 6 months, whatever frequency this is done. Okay, so then another one, reliance. So sales and use tax revenue as a percentage of total revenue. Again, a very simple number. And then debt service. So debt service, I don't know, we might need the finance team in the city to comment. We'll come back to that one. And then the 7th would be subjective opinion. So 1 greater economic metric, sales and use tax revenue as a percentage basis, expenditures over revenue compared to the trend, unassigned fund balance over the capital budget, reliance on sales and use tax revenue, sales and use tax revenue over the total revenue, which is 5, debt service 6, and 7 would be a subjective opinion, which would be, I assume, a vote to City Council. So I think we can present it that way. Any disagreements thus far? Okay, so I think we can agree on the 7 triggers, let's call it. And maybe this gets changed, but I think it gives us something to work for in the next week and a half, 2 weeks. 2 weeks, so that we can put a document together. And my goal is to make it 1 page. Maybe it's 2 or 3 pages, but okay. So debt service, I like that one. Nevin, that's a good one. Finance team or city, in greater city, opinion. What is how can we measure the total debt service? Because I know there are sort of tranches, and so how could we understand that? And is it reasonable to take a gross number and say, here's the total debt service, and then be able to compare that to historical average? Is that feasible?
It is. I'm not sure how helpful that would be. Most of our debt service is in our enterprise funds, which really doesn't play into fund balance, or reserve policy that we're talking about. There is a little bit of debt service in the general fund, but it's typically small projects, so it's not a significant amount of money.
And can you tell us about the enterprise funds?
As far as how much debt service they have,
I was thinking more just the general function and their purpose.
sure. Typically, that's for their larger capital projects. We borrowed a significant amount of money for the water fund just recently to do the lead service replacements. Sometimes and that's for the water fund. Sometimes the sewer fund would borrow money to support the South Platte Renew joint venture plant. And that's typically to keep up with EPA regulations and and just to keep the plant as modern as possible. But those play into user rates and not really general fund related.
Is it fair to say that enterprise funds are a big component of that debt service would be for capital projects?
Yes, almost entirely.
And the debt service in the general fund is supporting what function of operations, I guess?
It can vary. It's typically small projects. Council just passed an energy project for upgrading some city facilities. So that debt service will come out of the general fund. It'll be paid for by savings from those improvements. It's a very small portion if you compare it to what the enterprise funds have outstanding.
And debt service related to, say, like the GO bond, how does that function?
So GO bonds are paid for out of property tax, so they have a dedicated funding source. So they're treated separately from the general fund as well.
Thanks for that clarity. Any comments, Jay? I mean, you've been real quiet tonight. I'm not picking on you.
I'm mainly looking forward to being useful with the homework. Need to sit down and start to lay all this out.
I know our time is short. I'm curious if it is worth just prototyping it, throwing in what the values were from the last however many years or quarters, pressure testing it a bit, see what those results would be and how that aligns with the either perceived or real economic conditions, and then weighting or adjusting the weights that way. That's what I would recommend as maybe next step forward.
Tyson, based on some of the things I described, and I think, do we agree, by the way, on the triggers? Is there anything that should be redacted or changed, or are we barking down the wrong tree or up the wrong tree? I guess you could bark down too.
No, I think this is good. I mean, there might be a point where while we're working on this, we might say, like, we still have to decide, like, what is that national factor that we're going to use. So I think there's...
I was going to say I'm happy to work on that one.
Okay.
Homework.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I'll recommend a few.
Mm-hmm.
I did do some research on that already. Go ahead.
The unknown for me is just how we would weight them, which ones relatively have more of an impact, but I think we can test that.
What if you weighted them all evenly and 4 takes the cake? out of 7. I mean, I'm just thinking out loud.
Are there any state level indicators that we should consider?
I would say probably a really good suggestion, given that state law is, well, it used to be paramount. I don't know if it's paramount anymore, but state law is an important factor in how the economy operates and how we would make decisions locally. So, yeah.
I had thought through adding in some sort of, maybe this is less quantitative, but just a note around any key policy that could have a significant impact. And that could be another, maybe more qualitative factor or context factor.
Do you have any examples?
If there was a state level policy that, and think about some of the housing ones, or that significantly impacts the city's budget flexibility or dictates certain priorities. I think that maybe finance staff or city staff would have a better sense of what might have an outsized impact, but potentially including that on a space for anything like that might pop up.
I'm going to call it legislative measures. And that's going to be hard to quantify, though. Not that we have to quantify everything to perfection, but I mean, it's going to be hard to quantify. I think you made a great example in the affordable housing movement and state funding. And I mean, I think it's a substantial amount of taxpayer dollars and capital projects and development and construction. And certainly it's going to come with some good and bad things as well.
Well, maybe 7 Alpha is the council, and then 7 Bravo is anything in the last 2 legislative sessions that may affect things, just making sure that they're at least qualitatively mentioned, but not necessarily, we can't necessarily say like, oh, well, this is going to affect by this much. But just to make sure that the council is aware of these changes that have happened in how they affect, or that we believe that they will affect this decision making.
What budgetary or financial metric can we put on that?
I don't know.
Only included if impacts a certain percentage of general fund, or potential impact on percentage of general fund would be a possibility. I don't know what that threshold would be, but that gives a measure of intensity. And then it would be sort of a 1-0, do we include it or not, based on the potential budgetary impact.
I like it.
And do you see this as, this would be filled out and then it's sort of a decision of do we ratchet or slide, or is it then we fit into a reserve target band based on the results, or then those are just the inputs for council? Because I could see it going a couple different ways.
So the next thing is, I mean, I have this list here, so I think we'll have to refine it, but I'll put it out and I'll start writing on these, and we can maybe assign them for the end of the meeting in terms of the triggers. To your point, yes. So say it's a 4 out of 7, or it's a 5 out of 9, or maybe I'd like to tighten it so it's only 5, but we may struggle to do that. Maybe there are 2 or 3 angle triggers within each metric. So maybe the greater economic metric is a federal or national one and a state one. Maybe the legislative measures, well, that one's, Laura's going to write about that one, it sounds like. Or maybe Jay too. But maybe we combine some of these. But anyways, to your point, so when 4 out of 7 or 3 out of the 5 triggers are facing favorable or unfavorable, what adjustment is then made on a percentage basis? And I know Jay did a lot of homework on this, but how can we move from the triggers into the turning of the wheel?
Well, let's say that there is a threshold. Like, we don't really know what it's going to look like. There's going to be probably yes, no, and percentages. Which one, of these 7 or 5. So let's just say that exists. That then gets approved or because you have the council as part of that. So, because if they approve that, hey, we feel the need for this, then, I did take that 2% from kind of looking at our current situation, but then also just looking at like how long does a downturn usually last? Like how much do we expect to need during a downturn? So, and then also it gives us a couple years of that buffer if things continue to be a downturn. Then we go from that 16.7 to 14.7 down to 12.7, and then at that point the discussion needs to change. And that's another BAC meeting at that point. But that's all that really went into that decision. But it was to give us enough time while also meeting needs without. There.
I like that. I will preface this with this will be an ongoing, we want to get something out on the table, right? So to me, we maybe stick with 3 or 5 percentage adjustments within the range that we currently sit in. With the high, I think is maybe you can confirm, Tyson, it's 21%, 16.7 and 12.5. I don't remember.
21.4.
21.4 is the high, yeah.
21.4% is the high. 12% being the floor, 16.7 being the middle, and the current target.
And what is the reserve fund balance at 16.7%? Just roughly.
A little under 11 million currently.
So I think we don't want to necessarily, given what's going on now, as I understand the budget, there's already looking like there may be some adjustments. So I think you have to have at least 5 ticks within that range. But maybe it's 100 basis points for every click. I don't know. What should the click frame look like, and how can we decide on that now? I guess if you're at 16.7% at $11 million, 100 basis point adjustment, it's not that much. So I think I'm going to just propose that and I'll put this in the document, that we adjust with 5 clicks with between 12, 4, 12, 12 and a half. What is the bottom range?
12.4.
12.4 to 21.67. 21.4.
Is it 12 to 21.4?
Yes, that's correct. 12 is the bottom, 21.4 is high, and 16.7 is the middle.
So you have a range of 9.4%. So you'd be 188 BIP adjustment if you did 5 clicks. So if you said we're going to move the policy down from 16.7, 1 click down is 188 basis points. So you're going to be at 14.8-ish. Just as an example, because I think we need to establish that now. Don't you agree? Or at least some presentation of that, so we know how to use the trigger selections to make an adjustment. And then I guess the final thing of this to me is about as far as I can think. If there's anything else, I hope people add in. But the final part of that would be, okay, we make the click adjustment based on the factors and the outcome of those. So the third step of the reserve policy is then how long is it adjusted and when does it return to what I'm going to just call 16.7% baseline, if we agree that's the baseline.
Well, the baseline was from the GFOA, so I think we can just safely go ahead and agree that they've chosen that, and we had agreed to it a long time ago.
I agree. Nevin, any thoughts?
No particular strong thoughts. I'm just trying to look at some other policies and see if there's something useful. But yeah.
So if there is a drawdown, how do we, what are the things that we need to then say, okay, drawdown, or maybe we just say, if you draw it down, it has to be replenished within 12 months. I don't know, or a year, whenever that decision point is. Just an idea.
Yeah. I worry a little bit about arbitrarily setting timelines like that, but often like economic recovery can take a few years, and so even if the City of Englewood is in a position to start paying back after like a year, if it's doing so at the cost of contributing to programs that potentially benefit the city's recovery or employing people within the City of Englewood, I think it's worth just recognizing that potential drawback if we do set a potential timeline like that, especially arbitrarily.
I mean, I think we can maybe make it so that it is reviewed in a year, so that if it does get drawn down in a year, like, are we still in the situation? Yes, no. If we are, then we may have to draw down again. If not, sorry.
With that, yeah, if we, in that review, you could just say, go back to step 1 and look at the triggers again.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And so, sorry, I got real derailed.
My bad.
That's fine. Yeah, so we review in a year. And so like the council then decides based off of these triggers again, like should we be able to start paying back at a certain, let's say, percentage point or a percentage of what we've drawn down, however it needs to be. But I think there just needs to be, an understanding that what I agree with Nevin. I don't want to create an arbitrary, like, okay, we said that we were going to pay it back in a year. Why aren't we? I think it just needs to be another review of the current situation. Has it evolved? Has it changed? Are things getting better? And I think that's going to determine how much can we pay back. If things are going great, then relatively easy, right? But
I'd be happy to work that up in a proposal. I think in some of my research, I'd seen 3-year time horizon, given that things often are contracted, and some like percentage of recovery rules, or at least guidelines around revenue forecasts and allocating a certain percentage depending on how low they had come. So something like a 50-50 capital split, unless you drop below a certain, then it'd be a 75-25 rebuild capital allocation. So I'd be happy for homework to write up a bit of a proposal around that for the committee's consideration.
I noted you to do that. So
Say again?
I noted you to do that, so thank you. Forgive me, I can only do one thing at once. Okay, so should I go back through this, and then I think we'll try to assign the triggers so that everyone can write nothing crazy long, but just 3, 4, 5 sentences that includes sort of a formulaic way to look at these. And I think they can be as simple as favorable and unfavorable. Not that that can't be changed down the road, but I think we should keep this as simple as possible, as easy to use, with like some specific deadlines and decision points. And because I think we're making just this alone should be an improvement from where we are today. Any thoughts? And then I'll try to summarize this for us. Okay, stop me where I mess up. So the reserve policy will put the document together in the next 2 weeks to review at our meeting in, goodness, October already. October 2nd, okay.
October 2nd.
Thanks, Tyson. And I hear my notes, and we'll assign the triggers as we go through. Essentially, there'll be a summary of the policy. I'll put that here. I can write that, or someone else can write that. And then we'll go into the triggers to determine the objective, which may include a subjective opinion, which anyway, we'll get to here in a second, as to when the trigger, once the triggers are pulled, then how does the policy adjust? And I'll propose that portion. And then also then how long is it adjusted? What's the periodic review period? And Laura is going to write about the timing of the adjustment and payback. And I think she has enough examples that she can present that. So the triggers are one greater economic metric. And I think that would include a local economic metric as well as a national one. I'm happy to write about that one, actually. I'll take that one. The second I have here is sales and use tax revenue. I know Nevin wants to do that one.
Sure.
Okay. Can you also add, okay, let's do this. Sales and use tax revenue. And I think the city will be able to provide that to us on, call it a year-end basis for the last 10 years. that how you all are seeing this as well?
Yes.
Okay, the next is expenditures over revenue, if the city would also please provide that. And I say back 10 years, does that include where we are for the forecast in 25? Or does that include only closed out, call it audited financial years? Call it 24 and back 10 years.
I think you should include the forecasted.
I would say probably. So it'd be 25 full year forecast with 9 years previously for the expenditure revenue. Who wants to write about that one?
I can.
And the next, unassigned fund balance over capital budget. I can do that one since I recommended it. And sales and use tax revenue as a percentage of total revenue.
Happy to write about that one.
Wonderful, Laura. Okay, and I will send these notes out. It'll probably be tomorrow, but I will be working on this the next couple of days. Debt service. And I'll send this to you too, Tyson, so because we will need your help and expertise. Debt service. I feel like Nevin wants to do this one.
Yeah, although I think it may be more valuable as a consideration with when looking at other factors as opposed to like a standalone. And definitely, as Kevin was communicating, only looking at the small amount of debt service on the general fund because by definition the enterprise funds are kind of their own thing.
I think to me, it includes both enterprise fund and general fund debt service. Because what I heard is that the general fund debt service is relatively small. It's relatively stable, and that the enterprise fund debt service is more capital project based. So it probably is a much larger number. That's what I heard.
Do we feel like then we still need that as on our trigger dashboard? Like it's a big enough consideration? I don't know. I would just consider if there's one to cut, given our conditions, that's the one that I would cut.
I kind of tend to agree, and I think I don't really think that we should be paying too much attention to the enterprise funds when we're considering like drawing down or paying off the reserves, right? Because those enterprise funds are largely separate from the operations, right?
Yes. Do we see the reserve fund as more of a operational backfill, or do we also see it as an operational and capital backfill?
So here I think is where it's helpful for us to like look at the language of the current reserve policy and the way that I read it. I don't think that I think that I guess I don't think that the enterprise funds are relevant to that in the same way that operational or operations funding would be. And again, I agree that debt service may be the factor to just nix right off the bat based off of the feedback. I guess when I was looking at City of Canyon, Texas, it's not impossible that that could change over time, but I agree that I don't think it's the most relevant of the factors we've discussed. And I think it may make sense to just go ahead and cut it and save ourselves some time and consideration.
To a certain extent, it's already any debt service we do have in the general fund. It's already kind of included in the expenditure revenue calculation. So we're sort of double counting it if we have it as a separate trigger, potentially.
Kayla took us from 8 to 7, but the only two I have left are subjective opinion, which I don't know if anybody agreed or disagreed, that should be included in the trigger list. So we'll need to either bring back the debt service one or fill the subjective opinion one if you don't think that gets one of the 7 triggers. And the final one is just slate of measures, which I feel like Laura was going to do that. Go ahead, Nevin.
A few thoughts here. One, my understanding with those were that we were going to look at the state reserve. And I don't feel super strongly about that, but that was just my understanding. And I don't. To be honest, I think there is some benefit to having fewer triggers, not just for our sake and for the sake of the potential quality of research that we're going to be able to do and write up in this short amount of time. But also, I feel like there is some benefit in just making simple, if we're not going to be able to make a truly comprehensive tool, which as we discussed during our last meeting, I just don't think is feasible given our capacity and the timeline. I think giving simple guidelines may be more helpful to council, but I'd be interested to see what our different council members think, and whether it's worth trying to incorporate those kind of measures as well.
My initial thought on that is that some of those may be subjective factors rather than being part of the trigger dashboard could be potential review triggers. So some massive legislation gets passed at the state level that has a really big impact on city finance. And that could be rather than included in kind of the periodic review, could actually trigger a one-time review. That would be maybe how I would approach some of those more subjective factors in my 10 seconds of thinking about it. So interested to hear any other feedback or thoughts on that.
I could see that, having it be its own, standalone time for consideration. But I feel like it would be really difficult to give that some sort of measurable aspect. Whereas if something substantial enough happens in the legislature, I'm sure that the city council and city management staff will be aware of it making them uncomfortable.
With a bias towards action, I would propose we remove it then. And if, as we present the issue brief, there's feeling from City Council that we need to add some additional factors, then we can always do that.
Okay, so that's a move to remove the legislative measures or the subjective opinion.
Maybe both. I think the city council would be voting on this anyways, so their subjective opinion would be built in regardless of what the trigger dashboard says or is.
True. So that subjective is out, legislative measure stays. Laura, I think, wants to do that one.
I would remove both, not just in the interest of me having less work.
Okay, and maybe Jay can help her with that. So I'm at 6, so I guess debt service gets put back in. I just like that one. I don't know why.
Well, we will probably have another study session after this with council, so we can make changes at that point if we need to.
True, it just seems like so much work to do.
Well, I'm not the one who suggested that. I just know that it's possible in the future.
We could just not do much. I'm kidding.
Debt service can also stay in there, and it will just, given our current configuration, it will be favorable unless something significant changes.
Fair enough. So I have 7 things. 1 greater economic unit, state and local, national. Okay. Sales and use, I'll do that one. Sales and use tax revenue, Nevin. Expense revenue metric, J, or trigger, J. Unassigned fund balance over capital budget, Peter. 5 is sales and use tax revenue as a percentage of total revenue, Laura. Debt service, Nevin, great idea, so I'm going to give that one to you. And you can be creative with how you want to present it, but I think the load of capital spend should strongly be considered as part of a weight in determining reserve policy, as is operations as well. So I think that's why I like the debt service one. And then number 7, legislative measures. I heard Alpha and Bravo in intensity with a financial metric on revenue. Those are my notes. So that's the summary, the 7 triggers. Once the triggers are pulled, how much do we adjust policy? I'll do that one. So I did 5 clicks, 188 bips for 9.4% spread between 12 and 21.4%. I'll put that section together. And then how long, once the adjustment is made, the click is determined, then how long do we leave it adjusted up or down? And so I'll let Laura do that, do the write-up on timing, adjustment, and payback. And then, yeah, I guess I'm going to put this stuff up. It'll be tomorrow, but I'm going to start writing. And I think also we'll ask Tyson for those metrics, so we have those. And I guess it wouldn't hurt us to recirculate a copy of the reserve policy as it is now, because we'll probably start writing with that to get us moving. So anything else, and then we'll go to member's choice, or maybe that's now.
I think we had also agreed or determined that we were comfortable using expenditures as the basis. Okay, great. So that will need to get put in there.
And I had that as number 3. Anything else? Member's choice?
So the committee in October will be wrapping up reserve policy, but then also talking about the capital improvement prioritization metrics and that tool. And I talked with Jenny Nolan, the budget administrator, and we think it would be helpful after that discussion, after the committee makes some recommendations, to have a joint meeting also with the Planning and Zoning Commission, who also uses that tool, just to make sure that we kind of come to an agreement on the changes that we want to make and kind of implement that. And I do need to speak with the Planning and Zoning liaison. But Jenny and I were thinking ballparking maybe sometime in maybe November for that meeting. But I just want to get that on y'all's radar, and we'll work out dates eventually. And that can also be kind of a thing that as people want to join, they can. Or you can, designate a representative from the committee to join as well. But we just want to make sure we're taking in your feedback, but also planning and zoning's feedback.
Sounds great. Thank you. I think, everyone participates, so. But we can decide in October when we want to do call it November date.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Thanks for setting that up with them too. I think that's important. Okay, did I miss anything?
Mr. Chairman, I do have one other thing, item under staff's choice, if I might.
Please.
Just wanted to let the board know that because you see every department, and every department comes and makes presentations. We'll be talking to departments that have recently had changes in terms of divisions, which have moved between different departments. We'll be meeting with the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee to let them know about a recent change in which the Code Enforcement Division moved into the Building Division, and that is now the Division of Building and Codes. And that's really the commonly housed place where these divisions are housed. It has not been that way in Englewood for quite some time, but we think that now is the time to make that change. We also are moving the Stormwater Division, which has been in Public Works only for the last 4 or 5 years. We're moving it back to utilities where it was for more than 40 years. And we think we're going to really get some benefits out of the business services group that's in utilities that can really help get a little more financial rigor around the enterprise fund for stormwater funding. We found in the budget process this year that, bringing on the new stormwater detention pond and going to the stormwater folks and saying, okay, you've got to pay for your new asset. And they said, oh, we don't have the money for that. And so we have not really been doing maybe as much master planning and rate and fee planning every 5 years. And we're overdue for that now as we should have been. And we think having the same team that's doing that work for utilities, for our water fund and our sewer fund, can also do that with the stormwater fund. And so we've announced those changes this week and last week, and have been meeting with staff and explaining the why and the what and the how around that. But I just wanted you all to know that took place. There was only one elimination of a position that resulted from this, and that was from combining 2 divisions into one. We didn't need 2 division managers, and so we have eliminated 1 position. Any other positional changes people have been invited to apply for the new position that their position is being converted to, but just wanted to let this board know because you see all the departments, and that will be a switch that you'll see in this year's budget presentations.
Thank you. The stormwater to utilities makes sense to me. Tyson, can we add city's choice to the?
I think technically because I think staff members do count as a member. They're just not a voting member. There's staff. Did we? We can add staff choice if you'd like, though.
Just for the budget committee.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, unless anybody else has anything, I don't think they do. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you for coming. I know it's been a lot this month, so.